You know what? I am mad today. I'm really mad today. And I want to hit this podcast running with how protective I am feeling about my new teachers. Now, whether you are a baby teacher just starting your career, or you are a new teacher in a new school or a new grade level or a new intervention teacher, I'm feeling really protective of you guys today. And I've been stewing on some things that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to come on here today and I think kind of spew my frustration and see if I can turn it around at some point. But I need you to know why I'm feeling this way. So I have so many teachers in my life, both personally, professionally, clearly. I mean, you can't be in this business for almost 30 years and not have connections everywhere. But I've got teachers in my family, and some of my best friends are teachers and teachers I work with. And, you know, I hear from some of you across the country, and I'm hearing the same stinking stories sometimes, and I'm irritated today. Now, listen, no matter where you are, what you're doing, you have a difficult job. We know this, right? Sometimes it's because you have administrators that lack the important knowledge that they need to help guide and support you. They don't know about reading. They don't know how kids learn best to read. And so they just kind of take on a new direction willy-nilly with no real understanding of what they're doing. And that is frustrating. And they expect you to show growth in your students. Your students should be making growth, showing achievement. Of course they should. But here's the thing. This is the expectation that you as a teacher, whether you have 0 years of experience or you have 30 years of experience, that's your job. You're supposed to make your students show growth. But not always do you get the tools, the resources, the curriculum that you need to actually do your job. And so you are left, some of you, to piece together lessons with the free or cheap resources that you can find. You beg, borrow, and steal, and which means that what you have really isn't evidence-based necessarily, and you're just trying to fill the day. And when you're trying to fill the day, there is no connection from one lesson to another and how you can actually move your students from not being proficient to being proficient. And let's go ahead and add one more thing to this. The resources that you sometimes have to collect, you have to pay for out of your own pocket. Because let's face it, it's faster and easier to go and swipe your own credit card than it is to submit a purchase order and wait weeks, if not months, for what you need. And your kids need it today. So flipping frustrating. So here's what we're left with. You're stressed out, you're financially vulnerable, and mentally fragile. And then you throw the media in there. And the media is going to go ahead and talk about, how the system's broken and how teachers aren't doing their jobs and this and that. But you know what? It's pretty hard to do a job when you're not set up for success. We have got to figure this out. So I'm sitting here today and I am frustrated. I am worried about you. I am thankful that I have stepped out, quite honestly. And I just keep thinking, when are the powers that be going to figure this out? More and more teachers are leaving the classroom. Fewer and fewer teachers want to actually move into the profession. Something has to change. So that's my little story. Let me add to that. I sometimes get into these moments, and it's sort of like a little venting session, and that might sound familiar to you, something you may have to do on occasion too. And so I give myself this opportunity to vent, to wallow, to be angry and frustrated. And then I have to dig deep and force myself to recalibrate and remind myself that I need to focus on what is important. So today is meant to be a pep talk for you about fighting the good fight, because let's face it, the frustration, the stress, the behaviors, the requirements on you, they're endless. And it's so hard. And only a teacher knows. Only a teacher, and maybe the teacher's spouse, partners, those are the only ones that really know what this is like. So I want to share with you a quote that Dr. Roland Good had shared when I went to an Acadience training many years ago. Such a wise man. And when he said this, I embraced it, memorized it. I've used it so many times to come back to. And what he said, I'm paraphrasing, of course, because I could never say it as eloquently, but basically, if you don't have the time to figure out what's important, then everything is. And if you think everything is important, that you're going to try to teach everything. And if you try to teach everything, then you're going to be asked to do more. God knows we know that. And if you do more, you're never going to have time to actually figure out what's important. So you end up like this hamster on the wheel. And this is how burnout happens. And this is how mental exhaustion happens and frustration. And so we need to come back to what is important, despite all of the drama or garbage or whatever, because we know there are some. There are really some amazing things that are available to us in our profession. And let's focus on some of those important things. So I want to talk to you about 3 in particular today. And the first one, the first most important thing that we have to remind ourselves of is it's about relationships. It is about relationships. Now, I have this mantra, and this is a true story, honest to God, that every day I say to myself, when I approach my computer, I'm looking at my calendar and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. This is what I say to myself: people first. People first. And what that means is that I need to take care of the needs of the people in my life first. So that is my family. What burning needs does my family have? I go to my email and I'm seeing teachers that are reaching out to me as they're studying for their RECA, and they are worried about something and stressed out, and I try to respond as quickly as possible. Or I have intervention teachers across the country that are asking me for some advice related to a specific student. And I know that when they're in that moment, they're worried, they're fearful, they're stressed. And I always remind myself that is more important than paying that bill, than going to the store to grab that, than writing this blog post or recording this video or whatever it may be. People come first. We have to meet the needs of the people in our lives so that we can help them to alleviate the stress and the worry and carry on what the important work that they have to do. So as a teacher, what does this mean? Well, the emotional needs of your students have to come first. We know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? They have to have the basic kinds of, shelter and safety first. So the emotional needs of our students have to precede the academic needs. This is why I think there's such a big push to understand the ramifications of trauma in our students and how they are carrying this with them forever in some cases. And so sometimes that really great lesson that you have planned just has to wait, because the emotional needs of your students have to come first. There has to be an environment where they're safe, where they're validated, where they're cared for. So, you've got a kid who's asleep in your classroom. Kid didn't sleep last night. You really think you're going to be able to wake that kid up and like get him prepared for that AP test or whatever it may be? We have to address those things. Was there a tragedy in that kid's life recently that needs to be addressed? That student just has to be heard. If you are a leader, whether you are a teacher leader, an administrator, a leader in your undergrad work with other future teachers, but you have to check on the people, your peers, your colleagues, to see how they're doing. Check in on each other. The well-being of the people in our lives is fundamental. And one other thing, what if this person is you? You have to put your needs first. You have to validate what you're feeling, support yourself, do what you need to do to rejuvenate, to get the rest that you may need, because you absolutely matter. And people in your life matter first. People first. Never forget it. The second most important thing, I think, for teachers is to get back to the basics. Now, you have to learn to walk before you can learn to run, right? So when we're talking about teaching and teaching methodology, instructional procedures, and kind of the order of things, we know what works. We know that direct instruction is powerful for our most struggling kids. These are things we know. They should not even be debatable. We know that when kids are actively involved through multisensory approaches, that they are going to learn. We know that kids need to produce oral language and written language, and they have to discuss ideas. We know this is how they learn. So when we know what works, we are obligated, in my opinion, to do more of what works, less of what we may not know works or not. So we have to get back to the basics. So from a teaching standpoint, let's look at our instructional procedures, methodologies, protocols, routines, those kinds of things. Focus on the basics, classroom management. Once you have those things, then we can start expanding, but the basics are first. Now, from a knowledge standpoint or a curriculum or what do we teach? I'm an interventionist, so I always go back to those essential early literacy skills. That is my job, to make sure that my students have that I can help build those gaps, fill those gaps, so that when they get back to the teacher, they are more available, or they have more resources then to actually learn the standard. So getting back to the basics. If you know that you're teaching a math concept and you've got kids that are struggling with that math concept so drastically that you have to go back and reteach, then you better go back and reteach. We have to focus on the basics. Okay. Now, the third thing that I think is so powerful when we're focusing in on what's important, especially in our professions and our roles as educators, is keep learning, keep sharing, and keep growing. Don't ever be that teacher that has been in the classroom for 20 years and thinks they know it all. This is the way we've always done it, and it works for me so far. Always be looking to grow and learn and share. Now, I was the kind of teacher, still am, that when I see something that I get really excited about, I want to share it and I want to talk to people. And not everybody's receptive to that. Some people are like, oh, I've heard it, I don't want to hear it again. And so what we can do is find your people that help you to learn and help you to grow, people that you can share with. If you get excited about something from the teaching world, whether it's a lesson or an approach or a curriculum, whatever it may be, share it with those people that you know are kind of your cheerleaders and are going to get excited with you. And the other ones that are around are going to hopefully want to learn a little bit more. But that's how we grow, right? You have to share what you know, learn with each other, grow. Once you know better, then you're obligated, in my opinion, to do better. And if we don't really continue to grow, what we're saying is this is enough. That's enough. And you know what? It's never enough, right? It's never enough. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing. Fight the good fight. Keep working toward those things that you know are going to help your students. Don't get sucked in to the frustration of some of the things that I shared at the top of this episode, because it's really easy to kind of get your mindset to be negative. And if you find yourself there, give yourself maybe, I don't know, a few hours a day, and then turn around and get back to the hard work. One final little bonus, what you should be focusing on that's important, and we don't do it enough, and that's celebrate your success. Celebrate the success of you as an educator, of your students. Share what you're doing, share how your kids are growing so that people know what you're doing and can help you to feel like, man, I've got this. If you're doing a great lesson and you want to show it to your principal, call the principal. Hey, if you've got 5 minutes, can you pop in here at such and such a time? I want to show you this. Share it. The more you do that, the easier it becomes, for one. That makes your observations, your official observations, not seem so scary. But you're kind of controlling then when they're seeing things. Because when those walkthroughs happen and we're not prepared, sometimes they're a little scary. We never know when you've got a student who's kind of having a meltdown right then. So see if you can share those successes, have people come in and watch you. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them what your kids are doing. Success breeds success. We can share it so that it can inspire others. Now, listen, I know this job is not easy. Golly, oh my gosh, do I know it. But there are things that are important to do. Relationships first, people first, right? Focus on getting back to the basics. Learn, grow, and share, and celebrate the success that you have. And those kinds of things are going to help you to handle the frustrations so much easier. Thank you for listening today. I appreciate you so much. I would love it if you would leave a comment. If you are watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and click that little button, the bell little icon. If you are listening to the podcast, please leave a review. I'd love it. Love to hear from you. Drop a comment, share, reach out. You can always reach me at readingdiva06@gmail.com or Facebook or YouTube or wherever you are watching. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do. Bye for now.